Hey everyone, this is Hurls. This week we're going to be talking about Amazing Race episode 7 and 8, and then we're going to do 9 and 10 in a few days because of scheduling conflicts with me and Calbert. So unfortunately he wasn't able to join us, but I'm going to take us through Amazing Race episode 7. So Amazing Race episode 7, we start off from Uganda and we're going to Switzerland. So kind of interesting. I mean, Amazing Race has been to Switzerland before, so it's not, entirely different. But the episode is kind of interesting because it starts off with a lot of drama in that we see the Afghanimals, we see the Rileys. They're all kind of, even Team Fun, I believe, is in this, where they're kind of talking about who they're going to U-turn and who they're not going to U-turn. And I believe Colin and Christie's name kind of came up. I think everybody kind of seen them as the toughest team. Whether that's, the truth or not, that's what these teams have seen. So, or at least that's what they think. So we get to Switzerland, the Zurich airport, and then we go to the, looks like the Zurich airport railway station, and then they go to the Grindelwald railway station. And this is where it kind of gets real interesting because the Rileys talk to Nicole and Victor, and they kind of tell them their intentions of who they want to U-turn. And Nicole and Victor, they kind of take it the wrong way, and it kind of blows up in the Rileys' faces. So kind of from here on, Nicole and Victor kind of get thrown off their game because of this moment. It really seems. So this is very, very, it's pretty interesting how they, how this kind of drama starts off. And it's funny because you had the Big Brother pact where they were not going to U-turn each other. But, I mean, this, at this point you're thinking, okay, this pact might not be happening anymore with the way these two teams are interacting with each other. So anyways, that kind of just go their separate ways in disgust. At least Victor does. And they go to the Grindelwald, I'm going to butcher this name, but Gletscher Schult Glacier Gorge. In this leg's roadblock, one team member would be harnessed to a canyon swing. They would then free fall 400 feet and swing into the Gletscher Schult. After the swing, they would then have to search the gorge for the next clue, which really wasn't much. It was just like a netting over the gorge, and it had their clue on there, so they kind of climbed that netting. But most teams did this task, fairly easy. I think, when when $1 million is on the line, your adrenaline kicks in, and you just kind of like, okay, let's just get this done. 400 feet's huge. I mean, there's really no. I mean, I've never done anything close to 400 feet. Even the tallest roller coaster I've been on, I don't even know how big that would have been. Maybe 100 at most. So 400 feet is really, really long, and I don't know how I would have dealt with that. But these teams pretty much did it pretty well. The only one that kind of had any second thoughts was Nicole, but she got up there and she completed the task. So nothing really too much to say about this roadblock. So then the legs detour was a choice. They actually had to take a helicopter after this. They had to go to Grimsel Pass, and the detour was at Hang Holzeg or Gelmersee or Grimsel Canyon. I'm sorry. So it looks like it was Hang, Hulzag, and Gelmersay, which was one of the tasks, and then the other one was at Grimsel Canyon. So this leg's detour was a choice between water power and water down. And water power teams had to ride the Gelmerbahn. During the ride, teams had to memorize 8 signs that listed water basins and the amount of water they hold. When their ride ended, teams had to run across a hydroelectric dam and match the 8 basin names to their water capacities on a technical map to receive their next clue. Otherwise, they would have to ride the Gelmerbahn again, and that would have taken so long. So that was the first clue. A few teams chose that. The Afghanimals did, and Nicole and Victor did. So, most teams pretty much, they got it right on the first try. There really wasn't any drama in that per se. So, the teams got out of there pretty quickly. The only real thing about it was the Gelmerbahn. It was kind of like, I think it was also called the Vernacular, but I don't know. Maybe it's just called the Gelmerbahn in I don't even know what language Switzerland speaks, but we'll just say Swiss or whatever. But anyways, it just seemed like, the teams had really no trouble doing this. Because if they did get it wrong, I think it was a really big penalty. And then they had to wait for the vernacular to come back. So I think that was really the only problem with doing this detour, opposed to water down. So, I don't know. I think it was a all right task. It was, the scenery was pretty cool. So the other detour was watered down. Teams had to go canyoneering in the Grimsel Canyon. They had to rappel 100 feet down a canyon, jump from a ledge into a glacial river, and then jump to grab their next clue hanging from a rope. After receiving the clue, team members had to ride a zip line and release themselves to drop down into a river before hiking out of the canyon. So, this was pretty much it. Every team kind of just stayed the same here. The other 5 teams that did not do water power obviously did this. It was, you saw Colin and Christy do it. You saw the Rileys do it. You saw the Team Bromance do it from Survivor. Everybody else kind of did it. Team Fun, Tyler and Corey. So most teams, found this to be the more popular choice, and it was just basically, if you listen to your instructor, you were able to do the task fairly simple. Obviously, maybe the rappelling might have been a little difficult, but it didn't seem too bad, and it actually seemed like the much more exciting task as opposed to water power. So really, with me, when I'm thinking about this, I think I could have done both of them fairly easy. I have a good memory, but I think I probably would have done watered down as opposed to water power because of the fact that it was fairly, it was a little more exciting, and I think it was a little quicker than water power. So so I think I would have chose watered down instead. So anyways, so in leg 7 we had the results. Tyler and Corey taking first. This was their second first place finish, so they are definitely finding their groove right now. Second place on this leg was Colin and Christy, and once again, back-to-back second places. They're just cruising on all cylinders. Third place was Team Fun, Becca and Floyd. They're kind of finding their groove as well. Fourth place, we had Leo and Jamal, the Afghanimals. They had a pretty decent leg here. Not great compared to what they were at the beginning of the leg, but they did pretty well as well. The fifth place team was the Riley sisters. They did decent, not great, but good enough to stay in. Sixth place was Team Bromance, cutting it close, but they got the job done. And then seventh place, because they were kind of thrown off, like I said, from the drama with the Rileys, it was Nicole and Victor. So, this was by far their worst leg of this race, but they were saved by the final non-elimination leg. Talking about the non-elimination leg here, I get it. I think Amazing Race wanted every team. They wanted more teams as long as possible, and because this is kind of an all-star season, so they wanted it and they got it, and I was all right with it. Once I kind of realized what they were doing, I was fine with it. So I think, Nicole and Victor just really got thrown off, and they were really never able to recover. They had some issues finding the detour, so and they were kind of indecisive on which one to pick too. So this was definitely their worst leg, but they were saved by the non-elimination. So they're still alive at this point. So episode 7, I thought was decent. The scenery was just absolutely breathtaking. With the rappelling and the bungee jump, that was pretty cool. So I don't think the detours were really all that complicated. There really wasn't a lot of place switching. Besides Nicole and Victor, coming, the week before they were third and they go to 7. That's pretty big, but I don't know if the detours were like that great, but I'm gonna give this episode a solid 7.5. It was just your standard Amazing Race episode, so nothing really wrong about it, but nothing great either. So all right, so let's move on to episode 8. So this is the episode that gets really interesting. It's first time ever in a lot of different ways. So all right, so leg 8, we're staying in Switzerland. They go to the Hofstetten bei Brands, which is the Ballenberg Community Hall, and then this is where teams are they have a little downtime because they can't get in until a certain time. So we've seen this in other Amazing Races where they got to wait around and there's downtime. So I think they're kind of all getting the drama out that was from last episode. You see the Afghanimals talking to the Rileys. You see Chris and Brett kind of spying. This is really interesting. We get a first ever. Phil tells all the teams we're going to get a U-turn vote. 2 teams are going to get U-turned, but they are going to vote for on who they're gonna vote for. So at the Ballenberg Community Hall, teams found host Phil Kogan, who informed them that they would be voting for who would receive a U-turn. After each team openly voted, the two teams who had the most votes were U-turned. Teams could then retrieve their next clue while Nicole and Victor would find their speed bump. So basically, without really going into the individual votes, Colin and Christy were the most targeted. They had 3 votes, and then finally on the final vote, it came down to the Rileys, the Afghanimals, and I want to say the other team was possibly Nicole and Victor. I thought it came down to 3 teams, but Chris and Brett ultimately ended up choosing the Rileys, because it was just basically one of those things where they picked the team that they just didn't trust the most or they didn't like the most. But, having said that, Colin and Christie kind of just picked, they picked the Rileys too, just because they picked them, kind of. So I think, the placing, I think every team probably should have had to reveal who they were going to pick at the start. But I don't know, since it was a W turn, maybe they figured too many teams would be picking them. And I think that maybe the producers they kind of felt like, well, if they're going to pick for the same team, maybe we should just do it where, we kind of just go in a row. So that's kind of what I think happened there. So then it was found out that Colin and Christie had to do the W turn. So did the Riley sisters. So no real surprise. I mean, Colin and Christie were probably looked at as the most dominant, and the Rileys were looked at probably as the most hated. So I'm guessing that's probably part of the reason why Chris and Brett ended up making the choice they did. So and it was obviously a smart choice, because as we find out later, it ended up eliminating them. So anyways, then we had Nicole and Victor did the speed bump, which was they had to fold 26 of the Switzerland flag, and it didn't seem like it was anything too hard. So I think they kind of cruised through that pretty quickly, I'd say. So definitely wasn't bad. It was just 26, and they seemed to kind of cruise through that. So the detour was a choice between Make Hay and Cow Festival. In Make Hay, one team member had to use a scythe to cut a lane of grass while their partner raked it. They then had to properly stack the grass so that it could dry into hay to receive their next clue. And in Cow Festival, teams had to use the provided materials to make a floral headdresses and place it on a cow's head. They then led the cow to a festival and would receive their next clue if the headdress was properly made. So not really too much to say about this. It seemed like not many teams had issues with it. Colin and Christie had some issues with the cow, and it just really wasn't cooperating. And in this one, the Rileys seemed to do the Cow Festival pretty easily, but then they forgot their clue when they had to go do Make Hay, so that really hurt them. So they basically went in that task kind of blinded on not knowing, and they just had to basically copy Colin and Christie. So that was pretty much it. Most of the other teams did it pretty easily. The only team that really picked Cow Festival was Nicole and Victor, I believe. All the other teams seemed to do Make Hay. So anyways, so when we go to the roadblock, we see that the Afghanimals are lost. And so they get lost, and it basically puts the Rileys back into the game. And at the roadblock, one team member had to use a crossbow to shoot an apple off a scarecrow's head, much like Swiss folk hero William Tell, to receive their next clue. If team members struck the scarecrow, they had to reassemble it before taking another shot. So the teams actually had to drive to Lake Brins. They then they had to board a motorboat to drive it across the lake to a marked pier. After disembarking, they could either travel by foot or by funicular to the pit stop. But going back to the roadblock, it was basically a skill challenge, and I really enjoyed it because I feel like it kind of switched up the placing a lot. And there was some interesting stuff that happened during it. Most teams, I believe the Team Bromance were the first team to hit it, to get the apple. So I think that it was it was interesting how that kind of all worked out. But when it came down to the finish line, you had Team Bromance going for the funicular, while Tyler and Corey were going to. They ended up walking, so the funicular was closed, so that allowed Tyler and Corey to get the first place finish, and this was their third in a row. So this was pretty great streak for Tyler and Corey. Second place coming in was Chris and Brett. Had a really good leg here, and it really worked out to what they wanted to do. Almost had first, but they just could not beat Tyler and Corey in a foot race. And then we kind of had some drama, Team Fun had some struggles on this challenge, and Colin and Christie pretty much nailed it right away. And they ended up taking third, which is, pretty unbelievable considering they were double U-turned. And it's funny how they beat Team Fun, the team that sent them to the double U-turn. So I thought that was pretty good, sweet justice for them. So fourth place was Team Fun. Fifth place ended up being Rachel. Oh, I'm sorry, not Rachel. Fifth place ended up being Nicole and Victor, who did fairly well. I mean, they did a little bit better than they did the previous week, so I think that would be a win for them. And then it kind of came down to the Afghanimals and Rachel and Alyssa. And Rachel and Alyssa actually got to this pit stop, or to the roadblock, before the Afghanimals, but the Afghanimals were able to hit it. But it actually wasn't long after the Afghanimals hit it that the Rileys hit it. And, it was kind of a foot race. But at that point, the Afghanimals, they just had that lead, and they were able to get it a little quicker than the Rileys. So the Afghanimals ended up getting sixth place, and the Rileys got sent home. And, wow, it was kind of a shocker to see them go home. But, they weren't racing that great. And I think eventually, something was going to get them. And a W turn probably helped out, but they still had a chance to survive, and they just couldn't pull it off. So, so that was episode 8. I'm going to give it a solid. I thought it was really good. I'm going to give it a solid 9 out of 10. I love the U-turn vote. Yeah, it's the first time they've ever done it, and they could perfect it. But I thought the tasks were pretty good. I really liked the roadblock. I thought that was, challenging enough to where you could have some different teams switching places. So in that regard, I thought it was really good. And I also like the fact that we had some self-driving where the Afghanimals got lost. That's kind of like, old school Amazing Race to me, when you got a self-drive. So I really enjoyed that. So yeah, I'm going to give this episode a 9 just because the scenery was great, the tasks were pretty solid, and we had the first time ever a U-turn vote, and I really enjoyed it. So there's a new strategy, there's more social game that needs to be played. So I'm some seasons it's just all about the tasks, but when you incorporate the U-turn, you got to do the social game as well. So pretty cool. 9 out of 10. So what I'm going to do is, normally we do our power rankings. Well, we're going to save episode 9 and 10. We're going to do coming up this week, and we're going to talk about those 2 episodes because there's a lot to talk about. Obviously, we all kind of know what happened. I'm not going to explain it here because this is about 7 and 8. So what I am going to give is I'm going to give Calbert's power rankings from last week. Them. So I'm going to read his power rankings off, and then this was actually before episode 8 came out. So I'm going to say his power rankings. So he had number 6, he had Chris and Brett. Number 5, he had Leo and Jamal. Number 4, he had Nicole and Victor. Number 3, he had Team Fun. Number 2, he had Colin and Christy. And Team 1, he had his team, Tyler and Corey, which normally I would call him on the Homer pick, but I think Tyler and Corey probably at this stage could be considered number 1. They've done some really good stuff, but I still think if I was doing these, I'd probably just switch those two. I don't know if I would have had Chris and Brett so low coming after this episode. Obviously, the following episode, we kind of know what happens to them. But this episode, I may have ranked them ahead of the Afghanimals because the Afghanimals were just they were kind of messing up quite a bit. So I may have had them, I may have had them switched at least. But yeah, that was Chris's power rankings, and mine were just, flip those two, and I think he's spot on, and I agree with, most of it. So, so that kind of wraps it up. So, very fun Switzerland episodes. I'm sorry we didn't get to kind of do our normal show. We didn't get to do it quicker, but I feel like we got to do something for 7 and 8, so I'm just doing this solo show just to kind of, keep it going. So this upcoming week, we will definitely do 9 and 10. We'll try to get it done actually the night of Amazing Race. Hopefully we can do it then. So I would really hope so, because I really want to go strong into the finale, and I want to get our power rankings, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot to talk about. It looks like, so it's episode 9, obviously we go to Croatia, and then I think they still stay in Europe after that. So should be fun. Anyways, this is Hurls, and we will see you very, very soon.